Welcome to Training Unleashed, the show that will help you design and deliver training that's off the chain and will make a difference. Now, here's Dan Black.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Training Unleashed. I am Dan Black. I am back on the show from episode number 5. And in an unusual twist of events, we don't have a host. We just have 3 participants here. We've got myself as MC, I guess, and participant, and then 2 other Tortal teammates, Joshua de la Vega and Adria Myers. Josh, say hello.
Hi, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Josh, thanks for joining. Adria.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Super excited.
Yeah, super excited that you all are here because we had this amazing curveball sent to us a couple months back when we were out at one of our conferences. And I'll set this up for our audience, folks. We do a rapid curriculum design event for a lot of individuals, and typically here in the United States. So language is really never an issue, or we normally have just the normal challenges of language. We were talking to a gentleman who essentially runs the Yogurt King company of South America and wanted to develop curriculum training as he's expanding into different South American countries, and really excited about the Rapid Curriculum Design event, what it could do for his organization. We're chatting, things are moving right along. And then all of a sudden, boom, he says, oh, and by the way, all of our subject matter experts and participants in the event, business matter experts and leadership and key stakeholders, none of them speak English. So I think Adria and Josh would probably agree. This is where most organizations would be like, wow, I guess you're out of luck because we don't know how to deliver this. But being the type of organization that Tortal is, we started to ask ourselves those 3 questions. How might we? What are we trying to accomplish? How might we get it done? And then what else? So ultimately, what we were trying to accomplish was pretty clear. And how might we deliver it in Spanish was the first question I asked myself. So we started to look at Tortal as an organization. And here's where I'm going to loop Joshua into the conversation. Joshua, why don't you tell everybody what you do here for Tortal?
I am mostly involved with Tortal doing IT work, just supporting the technology that powers our company. So I was very excited to embark into the world of learning strategy when you mentioned there was this challenge.
Well, thanks for that, Joshua. And he's being modest. He is the guru behind everything that happens on your screen, whether you're interacting with one of the websites or the learning management platform. So he is all things IT. How many times had you facilitated rapid curriculum design prior to volunteering to get involved in this effort?
They're not much of a guru, but yeah, I had not been involved in facilitating a learning strategy or a curriculum design workshop at all. This was my first time.
And it's important to know for our audience, Joshua, what's your native language?
My mother language is Spanish. So, yeah, I do understand it. I speak it, I write it. But, all that I've done has been in English so far for these last 15 years.
Yeah, wow. So Joshua is the go-to a resource for Spanish, but not necessarily an expert in the process of rapid curriculum design or facilitation. And then Adria, you joined the team in the midst of my conversations with Josh and trying to figure out how we might help our friends in South America out get through this event. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved?
So I was actually at your house, Dan, as we were getting everything with my new PC set up, getting me ready to go. I was being onboarded with Tortal. And I think we were just getting to know each other a little better, and it came up that I was fluent in Spanish. And that's when you jumped out of your seat and said, wait, what? You know Spanish, and you know learning, and you work for the company? This is amazing. We don't need to hire outside translators. How cool would it be to bring an expert in learning to do the training because you're already familiar with the language of learning and the language of Spanish.
And what department do you work for here, Adria? We've got
so
Joshua with Learning Technologies.
Yep, so Learning Technology for Josh, and then I'm in Learning Development. I'm an instructional designer. So I usually am way further in the process, way after all of this has happened, and I'm actually developing the curriculum.
So we have an IT guru who speaks Spanish. We've got an instructional designer who, and how many curriculum design events had you seen or participated in prior to our journey here?
0.
That's a 0, exactly. So we had this challenge. We had the language, and now we had to get you all both through the process. So Josh, being the furthest away from this, or I would say having to take the longest journey from your natural skill set to the skill that the task you were about to perform. Tell our audience a little bit about what that journey was like, what was done to prepare you, and then what you did to prepare yourself, because I think there's some great insight our folks can use.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Dan. So initially, my thoughts were around supporting the team, where by performing translation only, I knew Spanish, the team needed the Spanish, I thought I could help with translation. However, as we went along, as we had our meetings, as we debriefed on what was needed, the task included actually facilitating curriculum design, which was something that I had not done before. So, as you can imagine, a lot more thoughts came to mind, a lot more challenges came to mind. Mostly concerned around the fact that the process needed to be well understood by myself from a strategic mindset. I also thought about how to best communicate this to our new audience in the Spanish language, and looking for the terms to use correctly in Spanish, translating them from the English. So there were a lot of things going on in my mind, a lot of things that needed to be planned out. Mostly, as I said before, involved with understanding the process for myself first, that I could apply it later.
It's largely a facilitation role, and I'm sure our audience is smiling just a little bit right now with their stereotypical view of IT guy all of a sudden being thrown into a facilitation role. Did that scare you a little bit, or? Of
course, yes, definitely. I was very scared about something being misunderstood, and how the process would work, how to bring the audience back on track on the strategy side of things that we needed to do. Fortunately, you were there, Adria was there, Crystal was there to just debrief and give guidance around fine-tuning a plan on how we would attempt each topic that we would discuss. So having your guidance was definitely a game changer onto what was going to be done.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. We worked a lot. We prepped for a lot of different hours, and you were very attentive. Adria, you were new to the organization. You spoke Spanish. Normally in the instructional design, for you personally, and being a person who understands transferring knowledge and getting folks up to speed, what were the key things that you knew you needed to have happen in order to set yourself up for success in this environment?
So coming from a training and facilitation background, but not really being in that seat, Josh was being put in that seat. Him and I worked together a lot on prep. We want to make sure we were well prepared, because that's, in facilitation, any training I would always conduct, that's where about 80% of my work was, in the preparation. So Josh and I held, obviously we had meetings with you for you to educate us on the process, but him and I had separate meetings as well, so that we as a team would be prepared for whatever came our way. That's when Josh and I decided the best way to translate so that the participants knew what was happening, and also you and Crystal knew what was happening from a Spanish and English perspective, is that Josh would do all of the Spanish speaking and translation in that form, and I would do all the English speaking to you and Crystal, and because it's a lot easier and faster than trying to switch back and forth between two languages. And we had a set time frame. So that was like, for example, one of our worries, that because of the translation, 2 days for the workshop wouldn't be enough. But we were able to figure out a plan, and we made that work.
We did. It was, I think it came off, and I'm hesitant to say this, but I think it came off better than anybody expected. And for our audience, you should know Crystal Ramey, who is the VP of Learning Development here at Tortal, and is typically a participant in Rapid Curriculum Design events normally, also joined us. So we had 2 fluent Spanish folks, not fluent in the process, but that we had to get up to speed in, was it 45 days? On a process that typically someone on our team takes 6 or 7 months to learn, and gets to participate in 4 or 5 before they're expected to facilitate, which you all challenged me too, because the nature of how we do this in our organization, we hadn't necessarily created the assets we would for one of our clients, so participant guides to make sure that the participants know what's going through what exercises they're going to be going through, but then also facilitator guides to make sure the facilitator has everything set up and that they're prepared, how to set up every exercise, and then also questions that they can ask and desired end results out of every exercise. So we actually had to create those assets ourselves in a very short period of time, and then also have them translated into Spanish for our participants.
We're so glad you're listening to this episode of Training Unleashed, brought to you by Tortal Training. The difference between Tortal Training and other online training companies is we're primarily a training company with technology, rather than a technology company that does training. Want to find out more? Just go to tortal.net. That's Tortal, tortal.net.
Let's fast forward now that we've gone through, and for this team, you've heard about the space learning. So we were walking Adria and Josh through various segments of a rapid curriculum design event and doing some practice and some role play. They also had the opportunity to dial in via Zoom, because they were both, we were remote when we were performing this, and listen to an English version once or twice. Joshua, did you get twice? I can't remember. Adria got once.
Yeah, we did it once, Dan. We did it once.
That's right.
So
got to see an implementation once and take your notes on that. And then we all got on a plane and traveled all the way south of the equator. And Josh was a great host down there. That's an entirely different podcast. But let's get to the event. We're there. We're with this organization. Everybody's speaking Spanish. For the first time, I am understanding what challenges non-English speakers are going through here in the United States. So certainly a new level of empathy that I brought in, and my Spanish even got slightly better. But Joshua and Adria, we get there. We're day 1 of the event. What's top of mind for you? What do you think really worked well?
I think top of mind for me, Dan, was just making sure that the whole process we had discussed before was correctly assembled. Just making sure that, as Adria mentioned, the consecutive translation and the simultaneous translation were going to work correctly. Just making sure that logistically we were set up in the correct spaces where we would not interfere with what the audience was saying, but at the same time we would be part of that audience to answer any questions.
Now, Josh, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because we had this conversation beforehand. Obviously we're going to have some cultural differences, or at least that we thought we might. And there was one thing that you were concerned about, especially with the culture that we were entering into, and it had everything to do with credibility. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, for sure. Yes, credibility is something big, because we did not want to come in and say we were just learning on how to facilitate a curriculum design. On the other hand, we wanted to express that we are the facilitators, but at the same time, we're bringing in the experts with us to the meeting. Culturally, that was very important because people tend to follow those subject matter experts more than people that would be just learning a new task or a new strategic endeavor. So that was important culturally. Also because we had a different type of meeting in which translation was involved. We wanted to make sure that there were no misunderstandings around what was to be done and that the experts were in the room with us and that we were the facilitators as well. So we did not want to communicate at any level that we did not know the subject that we were talking about at any point.
That's very interesting. And so for our audience, painting the picture, we have our customer who's hired us to do this job. We've got Joshua, who has worked very hard to become a facilitator, Adria, who works really hard to become familiar with the process and his linguistic support, but then also Adria is our key communicator. So she is the one who's whispering in our ear everything that's going down through Josh's conversations to make sure that we're getting a good sense that the conversation is moving forward. So Adria, I wouldn't say that you weren't necessarily one of the pips. You were almost like Gladys Knight too. So if you're Gladys in the background, what are what were you doing that you found was helping us succeed in this space?
So for me, my main goal was to try to get as familiar with specific words as possible, because one conversation that Josh and I had on a few occasions was the Spanish I learned was not in Ecuador. The Spanish I learned was in Mexico. And there's a lot of differences. Really, in every Spanish-speaking country, you're going to find different words, different accents, things that may mean nothing in one language and might be something really vulgar in another.
It's like y'all in the South and use guys up north, right? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that was one thing that Josh and there were certain keywords that like task and matrix and different keywords that we knew we were going to have to use. It's like, all right, what Spanish word are we going to choose for this so you and I know what we're talking about?
And I even remember, Josh, we were having this conversation where all three of us were talking about the use of a word that we use in English, a criticality, and there was no translation for it. So we had to come up with something entirely different to call it in Spanish.
That's correct. Yeah, criticality is a tough word in Spanish, right? Because you cannot say it with one word. You have to have a term or a combination of
words, a few words,
build up a phrase for it. So yeah, that's an example of what we needed to do to make sure that our audience understood what we were trying to convey.
Yeah, so we're not only translating, but we're also localizing, which is so important.
Yes.
Not just the same words. It's making sure that the intent and the meaning is there.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Adria, and she does this magnificent job, Adria, where she's listening and she's asking Josh's questions because she's his extra set of eyes and ears, because there's a lot, Josh, going on. I'm sure you can agree now as a facilitator. Mm-hmm. And so Adria is supporting him through questions. But then Adria, talk to me a little bit about literally having to listen, hear, speak in Spanish, and then be able to turn around and relate that information almost instantaneously into a different language to other people who are staring wide-eyed at the conversation.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's watching what we're doing. I'm trying not to be a distraction to what Josh is doing, trying not to be a distraction for the learning process that's going on in the activities, but at the same time, keeping you and Crystal in the loop the entire time in case you need to interject so we don't have to go backwards. So it took me a good hour or so to really get into the flow. I think during the first couple exercises, I just wrote notes. And then I would tell you when there was a little pause, okay, this is what this says. and this is what this says, because I didn't want to miss anything important as I was speaking to you. And I think a couple of times that happened, and that's why I think it was so awesome to have, this tag team that Josh and I had, because after each exercise, we did, I feel, an amazing job debriefing to make sure we all got the same message. But it was definitely a challenge. It did get easier, right, as the workshop went on. But there was one participant in particular that I had a really big challenge with, and I think Josh can agree. Yes, just because, well, number one, it was a little loud, right, in the space we were in. There was an echo. We weren't sitting right next to them. We were like several feet away, and there was one participant in particular that spoke so fast, so fast, and I was like, okay, I caught half of that.
Right, and so challenges that happen when everybody in the room speaks the same language, just probably exacerbated by the fact that we're dealing with multiple languages.
Right.
I think from Crystal and I's perspective, halfway through the day, we started to get a feel for everybody's nonverbals, and being in a communication space, you're amazed at how much nonverbal communicates when you can't understand a word that's coming out of the individual's mouth. You get a feel for what they're saying. And so that was an interesting learning by osmosis.
I think for me, that was one of the most amazing things for me to watch, because there was an activity going on. There was one participant who you noticed her body language, and you noticed that she was wanting to say something but wasn't speaking up. And you didn't say anything to me. You didn't say anything to Josh. You said something to that young woman and said, "Hey, you, I know you want to say something. Speak up." And she did. And it was great. And I'm like, go Dan.
Well, I did have Google Translate on my computer, so I put her name in and asked, do you have something to say? And so I did my best not to murder that particular the phonetics in Spanish. So the day goes through. We have these 2 days. From an external perspective, I was really pleased. First of all, with y'all and the dedication that you put towards this particular effort. But maybe I'll ask, Joshua, you're back now in an IT environment. We've already talked about the next time we get to do this in a Spanish-speaking country, so you can be a part of it. But what did you learn from this, and what do you take back, and what do you employ in a totally separate environment?
Yeah, there's definitely so many things that you learn. I actually think that on a facilitator to student type learning environment or scenario, the facilitator learns the most. There are a lot of things you learn. I do want to step back a bit and say what Adria was talking about, the translation first. And I can't tell you enough how easy it made for her to be doing simultaneous translation for you, while I was doing consecutive translation for the team. One of the things you got to keep in mind is that your brain, when you put the brain to work in one language, is hard enough to switch into a different language on the spot. So just having not to go back and translate into English was great, because I could identify and just be on the same page with our audience. I think that also made the audience more comfortable to know that they could freely ask their questions and they would get an answer from me in Spanish, while Adria was doing all this B work, right? This small work of just doing the simultaneous translation with you and Crystal. So I just wanted to touch on that point first, to say how that made it so much easier for the facilitator. Second of all, to answer your question, wow, now that I'm back in the IT trenches, right, I have the knowledge firsthand of what happens in the front lines. It's just amazing to see those wow moments for the audience, just amazing to see how the process works, how they identify their critical points in training, and how training actually will make them fit better, each one of the participants, into their places in the company. So that's what I take with me now now that I'm back in the trenches, I see how I can support the company better as the learning strategy team with you and the rest of folks with us just go out and do these curriculum designs. So it has been a great experience.
Training Unleashed is brought to you by Tortal Training, specializing in e-learning and interactive online training solutions for corporate, government, nonprofit, and franchise organizations. Tortal makes effective training easier. Just go to tortal.net to gain access to real-world tools that can make a difference. That's tortal.net, Tortal, tortal.net.
Adria, the person who is the builder, right? You know, if Joshua is out there building the technologies to support all of this, but you're actually putting the information together, you know, being a part of this event in this different type of environment, what were your big learning moments or aha moments or takeaways?
I would say I just have a whole new respect for, number one, the learning strategy team, and the fact that you guys hammer out these rapid curriculum designs.
No, keep it coming. Keep it coming.
Okay, I'll keep it coming. You know, the fact that you guys do this, weekly, and many of these. We were only doing the design workshop for 2 days, but I know that there's many hours of work after the workshop with all the data that you collect. So it was really cool to see that kind of full circle, because in my role, I see the end of the circle, right? Because the sale has been made, the plan has been made. Now we're just developing and kind of turning that over to the client. But now I've seen the front end of that. And so I just have a whole new respect. Now when I get a project, I'm thinking, oh, what was the design workshop like? How did they come up with this? You know, okay, this company needs, 20 hours of instructor-led training and 15 of e-learning. You know, now I know the process behind that, so it made everything click for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's really good. I guess for me, it's fair to, the person who was originally introduced to this by a trusted colleague and mentor of mine 8 or 9 years ago, and have added elements to it from my experiences in design thinking and human-centered design. It was really interesting to watch two folks who, within 45 days, we were able to bring up to speed. And I don't want to use the word naturally handicapped, but not part of their normal everyday skill set, be able to implement it, which is, first of all, a testament, to the quality of folks we have here at Tortal, and especially you two. I think
thanks.
Hey, and then another part, and this is very selfish of me, is to watch a process that you have worked on and put together for a long time happen in a completely foreign, different environment and it's completely out of your hands, and it's in a different language, in a different culture, and to see the same result, the same level of excitement, the same level of aha moments come from the audience, and that the product, the deliverable that comes out of the event is still that valuable to the client, was really a huge validation moment for me. A lot of times our team will get the comment, our industry is different. And our typical response is kind of tongue-in-cheek is, we're all different. We all have the same challenges. We just experience them uniquely. And hearing those same challenges, experienced in a foreign country on the other side of the planet, in a foreign language, in a different type of business, was really, I guess it just brought home that at the end of the day, we're all human. And so long as you're dealing with humans, you're going to have those same type of problems. And the science and methodology, it really works as long as you're dealing with humans. But I guess before we go, you've been nice enough to answer all my questions. Do you, Joshua, have any questions for me?
Well, Dan, I was most certainly interested on knowing what were your challenges and what your thoughts when this was going on, when you actually put out the challenge to me and to Adria and said, can you guys do this? Were you expecting something less or more than what actually happened?
So I take a page out of my dad, old Colonel Black's book, one of his 15 guidelines for leadership and management. One of them is, it ain't as hard as you think. And so when the challenge presented itself, I actually asked the universe for help first. And I said, okay, universe, I need to be able to do this in a foreign language. And then you and I were chatting, and you presented yourself, and it wasn't but 2.5 weeks later, Adria joined the team, and I just happened to be having that conversation while setting up her PC here, and there was, some unexpected resources. And
Thank
then
you, universe.
Yes, thank you, universe. Thank you, Crystal, thank you, ATD, for bringing us together on the board, Adria. I don't know, so many things, right? But boom, there it was, and now it was, okay, what do I need to provide you in order to make you successful? And everything just seemed to present itself. I mean, on purpose, we're thinking about it, but even we had an event that we were coming up, and I thought to myself, well, you all can dial in and listen to the entire event. I'll just bring my webcam, and that way you can take notes and we can debrief afterwards. Now that I've walked you through it internally, you watch a live one, listen to a live one, and we won't be able to take away from your day because you can listen, while you're continuing to get your things done. So yeah, that was that's kind of the mindset that I went through. But Adria, one parting question.
Okay. So let's see. What can I ask? Well, other than sharing about your experience with the toilets flushing in the other direction.
And they do. I have video evidence for my 11 and 8-year-old.
Video evidence to prove. I'm sure the audience is super interested in that. Going back to what Josh said about how him and I were concerned about establishing credibility and want to make sure that we did that. How did that process feel for you, and being able to establish credibility as an expert and a leader who was leading us? How did that feel for you, and do you feel like you accomplished that, not being able to speak the language?
So for that, Josh's comments around that and your comments initially around that, knowing the culture so much better than I do, was really important for me, because those are the things that I think can make or break an environment. So I didn't see myself as actually needing to establish myself as an expert at all in the room. I was expert support. So that was the mindset that I went into, and every time, I know there was a few times, Joshua, during the event, especially maybe more towards the end, where we got into some pretty complex conversations with the team, and you were relying on me for some answers. And so I was trying to be very cognizant of tone, even body language that I was using, versus as a facilitator, you kind of have this establishing confident body language, whereas in a supporting role, I even switched that just a little bit and tried to be very cognizant. It was easy to do, mostly because of the preparation work that both you had put into it, and then how you handled yourself during execution. And quite frankly, my perception at the end of the event was that our customer felt like they had 4 very, very qualified individuals in the room, and they got a great product, and they had a lot of good aha moments. And I think most importantly, they've got buy-in from everyone on their team based on the work that we did together, and they've got a plan to grow their organization and scale their training function appropriately over the course of the next 7 to 10 years. So it's a long answer to a short question, but yeah, that's that was really critical for me. The letting go when it's your baby. I was probably, if I had to sum it up, just letting go, letting you all perform, and even maybe letting you make some mistakes along the way, or not even really mistakes, but just some mishaps where you say, okay, well, I'm going to revise that just a little bit, and being okay with that was something I went into consciously.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would definitely say you're on point with establishing those relationships with the client, considering they're taking selfies with us and joking by the end of, or actually by like lunch of day 2.
Yeah, what was it? Oh my God!
Oh my God! That was great.
That was great. Well, listen, audience, thank you for joining this. We hope you learned a little bit. Just a quick recap. The challenge of presenting a known process in a foreign language with individuals who had never facilitated the process before. And the key points are to not try to dump everything on the individuals all at once. Look for opportunities where you can expose them to it before they get in there. Make sure that you provide them with appropriate assets. And sometimes providing your facilitators with appropriate assets is also about providing your participants with appropriate assets, because they can help guide the process. And then, make sure that you have ample support there at the event. And most importantly, be willing to let go. And I think probably in a separate podcast, because we're coming to the end of our time here, we'll have to discuss all the learning things. But I think critically for me, it was getting to know some of my teammates in different environments who I don't need to normally react with, and learning more about who you are and what you do. I feel like we're all a lot closer and can work even better together now.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
All right, Joshua, Adria, thank you very much for your time today. Training Unleashed audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell your friends about this, because we are trying to get this particular podcast to the #1 downloaded podcast across the globe. Guys, you want to say, I'll say adios, but we got to do a little something in Spanish, right?
Hasta luego.
Adios, amigos.
All right, buenas tardes.
This has been Training Unleashed, but it doesn't stop here. Just go to trainingunleashed.net to subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be well on your way to delivering training programs that are off the chain. We'll talk to you next time on Training Unleashed.